What is good, people? Welcome back to another video on 8 Count. In today's video, I'm giving you my reaction to UFC 281, which went down last night. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Be sure to leave me a comment down below, giving me your thoughts on the main event. And let's get straight into it, guys. What did we just witness? Unbelievable. Alex Pereira is your new UFC middleweight champion. He defeats Israel Adesanya by 4th round TKO in a fight which was really slipping away from him. Overall, it was a really good fight, and I think the fight had, a story to tell, really, and it was told over 5 rounds in which each round was very different. I think the first round you saw Izzy have a lot of success with the feints. He was getting Alex to bite a lot on them, and that was giving him a lot of intel, which he was using extremely well to pick apart Poltan. And for me, you saw Alex being punished for each and in every strike he was throwing. It seemed like in the first round, he'd throw the hands and Israel would throw a leg kick to counteract that. And if he went to the leg kicks, Israel would come down the middle with that straight right, which he was landing with, a lot of ease throughout the fight, really. For me, though, the fight did take a turn in round 2. Pereira was able to, get into the range, which he really liked. He was able to push Israel up against the fence and land. And, Israel was looking to clinch a lot, but we saw in the second round, Pereira was able to use that to his advantage, land a lot of strikes when Izzy was just holding on. He was just chipping away with little body shots here and there. And, towards the end of the round, it was a round which he was probably winning anyway, but he put a cherry on the top of it by securing the takedown. Round 3, I think Israel came out. He changed the game up once again. He was able to take Alex Pereira down. And when he did that, I think he did a great job of controlling him. His wrestling didn't look, spectacular, but when he did get the fight to the ground, he was able to use a lot of wrist control to kind of stop Pereira from getting back to his feet. He was able to hit him with quite a few shots, but I wouldn't say any of them were too damaging. He was just making Pereira work a lot harder than he was. So, it was paying really into his favour. In round 4, we saw a bit more of a laboured Alex Pereira. And it seemed that Izzy was really running away with the fight. He was landing the right hand down the middle whenever Pereira was coming onto him. He's using his range to kind of, keep Alex from pushing him up against the octagon. He's having a lot of success. But this all changed in round 5. I think we saw Alex Pereira, who was not baiting and, making reactions too much to some of Israel's feints. Kind of saw Izzy get away from that towards the end of the round as well. But I felt like what Alex did a great job of in this fight, which I really wasn't expecting, and this is why I picked Izzy, he was able to cut off the octagon really well and kind of put Izzy between a rock and a hard place. And, Izzy would be, back up against the fence. He had a decision to make. Is he going left or right? If he goes right, he's going into the power hand of Alex Pereira. If he goes to the left, he's going into the power hand of Alex Pereira. And if he goes to the right, he's going into that left hook. And, you could really feel the tension of the fight when Alex was able to back him up. Izzy did shoot a couple times, didn't really get anything going. I felt like he was using the clinch quite well in terms of his way to maneuver Alex Pereira. He was able to, add trips in there, which weren't really anywhere near getting the takedown, but, it was keeping Alex off balance and making him work. Later on in the round, Alex Pereira was able to kind of check a leg kick, I believe, of Israel, and Israel tripped himself up. And this kind of gave this momentum to Pereira, which was kind of fake, right? Because he didn't really hurt Izzy. But Izzy tripped over and you could feel the momentum kind of swinging the fight. Pereira then was able to get Izzy up against the fence where he was landing a hard right hand, which kind of buzzed Izzy. But it was that sort of shovel hook, which was, really wasn't a real normal hook, and it wasn't an uppercut. It was kind of a mixture of the two, which came round the right hand of Israel and absolutely shook him to his boots. He was wobbling on the feet. I think it was a fair stoppage. He's swinging from left to right, and his hands were down. And for me, I felt like he was going to probably be put out cold if the ref would have let it go maybe another 10 seconds. I just couldn't believe what I saw. I really didn't expect this fight to go down the way it did. I thought we'd see some wrestling from Izzy. I think it was, a question which was asked of him because of the knockout in their kickboxing fight, and people thought maybe he's scared of the power and maybe he'd look to wrestle. He was answered at well, he was asked a lot of questions about, you know, the fact is he going to look for those takedowns, and you know, he's kind of like no showing it, and you know, kind of giving answers which would suggest otherwise. But I felt like he was going to look for that takedown. To be fair, when he got the takedowns, I felt like he did a good job of, like I said, manipulating Alex Pereira's sort of posture and making him want to get back up to the feet, but using that wrist control to kind of ride on top of him. But for me, I think he struggled to get the takedowns a lot, and I don't feel like it really helped him all too much throughout the fight. I think, you know, his people were going on about how it was tiring out Pereira, but I also think it was wearing on Izzy as well, because he's not used to going out in a title fight and shooting takedowns, and we saw him do that more than I think we've ever seen him do it before. I can't recall him really shooting on anybody else. And the thing which makes this fight so fascinating for me was the fact that Alex Pereira was really able to make Israel Adesanya fight his fight. He was able to back up Izzy. You know, a lot of people back up Izzy, but they never have success with keeping him along the fence line. Pereira was able to do that on multiple occasions in this one, and I think that's where the fight really had its ending, right? Because you look at the likes of Robert Whittaker, they fought Izzy a lot of the times either rushing in, where Izzy's able to use his footwork, which is great, and, you know, get out of the way of things. And other times, you know, you see people go on the back foot and, you know, kind of make Izzy shoot first. Pereira didn't do that. I think, like I said early on in the fight, those feints of Izzy were giving him a lot of problems, especially in round one. Of course, he was buzzed really badly at the end of the round. But I think what he did so well was, you know, he was able to stay calm in there. I think his footwork was, you know, wasn't as flashy as Izzy, but it was very important. He was able to, you know, kind of creep up on Izzy, and he wasn't rushing in. He was able to kind of stand his ground at the distance that he wanted to fight, and he made Izzy fight where he wanted to. You saw Izzy, I think a lot of the times, you know, when Pereira would look to strike, you know, he would maybe be a little bit too close, and that was allowing Izzy to get to the clinch. But in all honesty, I'm just so amazed, man, that I didn't think we'd see him do that to Izzy. I thought Izzy was always going to have that ability to use the octagon and get out of range. You know, in kickboxing, the ring's so small, and, you know, it wasn't like Pereira was able to hold him against the ropes or, you know, get him in those positions all the time. Izzy was using his footwork well in the ring, and I thought that was going to, you know, play part in the octagon, but super impressed, an amazing finish, and I think this sets up the rematch. I kind of want the rematch to happen because I think it's an important fight, and to see where Alex is, and, you know, if Izzy can right the wrongs once again, you know, 0-3 against Pereira now. But I also like the idea of Robert Whittaker versus Pereira. I think that would be a real fun fight. I think, you know, maybe Rob looks to shoot a lot, but I think on the feet, his style would make dynamite. So whatever happens, I wouldn't really be too bothered. I'm pretty sure they're going to go for the rematch, and I'm not sure when it's going to take place. I don't know if they can get on the card with Brandon Moreno and Figueiredo. I don't know when that fight's happening. It could be happening like next month, for all I know. I'm really not too sure. But if that fight card isn't until next year, I'd like to see that happen. But anyway, I would like to see him defend it in Brazil. You know, Brazilian champion, you know, at one time in MMA wasn't like the rarest thing. Now it is a little bit less uncommon, but we are starting to gather of the Brazilian champions again. You know, look at him, Figueiredo, Amanda Nunes. You know, I think you could make a really good triple header card down in Brazil if you was to put, you know, Nunes, Pereira, and Figueiredo on it. That would be pretty sick. But we'll go to the co-main event. Carla Esparza is defeated by Weili Zhang in the second round via a choke, which I'm not too sure what you would call this one, because, you know, she wasn't actually on the back. It was almost like a back crucifix. She had the arm wrapped up, and she was with her legs, and she was able to kind of control the other arm and go for the choke. But in all honesty, it was kind of what I expected. I think Weili was just too much for her everywhere. Obviously, Carla would have the experience and probably the advantage in the wrestling technique. But I felt like we've seen Weili come a long way in her wrestling, and with her sort of physical attributes, would probably be able to, you know, counteract that and probably have the advantage in terms of stuff in the takedowns and that sort of likelihood. On the feet, I knew it wasn't going to be too much of a matchup. Carla just doesn't have that sort of stand up where she feels like anything is significant. I didn't think she'd be able to keep Weili off her. And to be fair, she did an okay job in round 1. But in round 2, I thought Weili was just going to run through her. She gets the rear naked choke. For me, I think Carla Esparza as a champion you look at that strawweight division, you look at the crop of women that came through from that tough season with, Rose Namajunas and Carla Esparza, and then all the other girls who've been brought in from outside the organization. I think over, little time, because it's probably been less than 10 years, right? And you've seen the skill set of these women kind of over the years, like, improve. It's almost been like my experience watching UFC, but in women's MMA over, a really short period. They've kind of gone from, masters of one thing, and then they've become more well-rounded, and now they are real, true MMA fighters like Weili Zhang. I feel like Carla Esparza is a little bit stuck in the past. I feel like in terms of a stand-up, she just doesn't have anything to kind of get your respect. In terms of her strikes, I do wonder like what she would be like if she had like killer power and like a rocket of a jab. Real nice right straight. She would be a problem because her wrestling is really good and her top game is solid. I just feel like, when you rely upon that, it's always going to be a problem when you come up against someone like Weili Zhang. I guess it's what everyone was expecting, and I think this sets up the trilogy now with Rose Namajunas. I think that fight will be good. It's hard with Rose because she does such spectacular things, and then, you kind of see her downfalls, but I'd probably fancy her in a rematch against Weili. I think Weili probably could have taken it. I did score it for Rose in the second fight, but I can see the case for Weili Zhang. But that third fight would be awesome. So hopefully that happens soon. We move on now to Poirier versus Chandler, which was the fight of the night. And I'm not surprised because it was action-packed. I picked Poirier for this one. I felt like in terms of those sort of moments where it is a war, he would probably have the more discipline, and he's a little bit more battle-tested, I feel like. Chandler came into it and he was able to hurt Poirier off the rip. You heard Poirier talking about the fact that, if he would have thrown, more straight shots, he probably could have got him out of there. But, Chandler's going to have that advantage against pretty much everybody. He's got that speed where he can close the distance within a blink of an eye and shut your lights out. But for Poirier, I thought he was calm, composed, and he stuck to the task, in round 1, pouring it on real late and, almost having Chandler out of there. You think if there was 10, 20 seconds left, Chandler's probably going to be finished in the first round. The thing what kind of impressed me with Chandler was the kind of difference in approach from round 1 to round 2. In round 1, we saw Chandler kind of get a little bit excited, and I think that's probably part of his downfall, especially in the UFC. He gets on a position where he has an advantage or he's got the upper hand, and he kind of goes balls to the wall, he doesn't really pace himself, I guess you could say. Like Poirier said, he was throwing those loopy shots, but I didn't feel like he was picking the correct shots which he could have thrown. But anyway, guys, he got the takedown and he did a great job, but he was like going 100% throughout the first round. In round 2, he was able to back Poirier up, get the takedown, and that's where I saw an improvement in his game plan. He was able to stay calm. He was able to control Poirier for large moments of the round. I think it was in round 2 where he got on top and it looked like he just sneezed or something, and this lump of blood, of mucousy blood, went on top of Poirier. I was like, ugh. But I think he fought a better round in round 2, despite not having the damage output that he did in round 1. It was a more, I guess you could say, educated round on his part. And I felt like that's what Poirier kind of had the advantage in this fight was, when he was on top and in rounds, he was more educated. He was more, I guess, chill in a way. He wasn't rushing everything like I felt Chandler was. In round 3, Chandler goes for that huge takedown. It was like single leg, high crotch. But Poirier, I'm not too familiar with wrestling. I've never done wrestling. It's not a very common thing over here in the UK. Kind of wish it was, because it looks like a real fun sport to kind of partake in. I wouldn't say it's the greatest sport to watch. Whenever I've watched it on like Flow grappling, or was it flow wrestling? But there are fun moments, and you know, when Chandler got to that takedown, Cormier said that he slammed him to the wrong side, and that's why he had to scramble so quickly to try and get to the back to get position. And you saw Poirier end up on top. Poirier ends up getting to the back where he sinks in that RNC, and it's night over for Chandler. And it was such an impressive win. I mean, Poirier's in these fights, man, and I don't know how long he can do this for, because he's taken a lot of damage as well. And the same with Chandler. I think since Chandler's come in, he's probably been one of the best pound for pound signings UFC have made in terms of entertainment value, up there with Justin Gaethje. And in such a short time, he's done so much. And in my opinion, I feel like Chandler is the probably best matchup for Islam Makhachev. I think in terms of his ability to scramble and, you know, kind of counter the wrestling of Islam, he would give him problems. But the main problem would be that ability to close the distance so fast and land with ferocious power. So I'm kind of disappointed in the fact that he isn't going to get the shot now. But Poirier's definitely put himself in the shop window. Whatever happens with the Volkanovski versus Makhachev fight, you know, I do expect Poirier to probably be in and around the mix for the winner. I feel like, in all honesty, Poirier should probably fight Beneil Dariush. That fight would make a lot of sense to kind of, you know, make a number one contender for the Islam fight, which I believe is going down in Perth, Australia in March, I believe. So I think that would give Poirier, you know, time to recover, get back into another training camp, and they could probably do that fight, you know, not on the same card, but in similar sort of time, whether it's just before, just after. And that would give us a unanimous and decisive sort of number one contender for the UFC lightweight title. So that's something I would like to see. Fair play. I thought this was a brilliant fight. And both men, like, you know, either they win or if they win or lose, it doesn't really matter. They always put on an entertaining performance. And I think that's what a lot of people forget about the UFC. It is a sport, but it kind of has that sort of thing, like, if you aren't entertaining, or, you know, if you cannot, you know, put on a performance, you have to do either one of the two. You've got to be putting on real special performances, or you got to be shit hot on the mic, because that's how you make the money. And, you know, these guys do their talking in the ring with exciting work. In the bantamweight division, Frankie Edgar is defeated by Chris Gutierrez via round 1 knockout. This one was sad, man. I mean, all credit to Chris Gutierrez, obviously a very dangerous guy. To be honest, going into the fight, I kind of forgot who he was, and when they showed the highlight packages, and I'm like, oh shit, I watched that fight. And yeah, man, he's dangerous. He obviously on the feet, he's very well-rounded. His kicking game is phenomenal. And he kind of did a similar sort of finish on Edgar to what we saw with Sandhagen. And all credit to him, you know, obviously he said he was having a hard time in training camp. Yeah, I think it was his mother and one of his coaches who are struggling with cancer, and you know, I'm happy for him to get the win. But for Frankie, man, to go out like that, it's so sad. You know, when I started watching the sport back in the day, Frankie Edgar wasn't the champion in the UFC lightweight division. It was just before that sort of time period, I believe. I think BJ was the champ, and I remember seeing this guy come along, and I loved BJ Penn when I first got into the sport, and he absolutely just ran through him, and he did it again and again. But I mean, he's been around for me ever since I've kind of started watching the sport, so he's kind of like one of the last guys to be, you know, still here. It's like him, Jim Miller. You know, the list is finally getting shorter and shorter. The whole generation which I started watching is pretty much going to be extinct in the UFC. But yeah, for me, it was a sad moment to watch it. You know, I think of Frankie as a guy who, like they said on the coverage, you know, brought up at lightweight, was really undersized, but his skill set at the time was kind of above everyone else in the division. Went through so many wars, you know, the Grey Maynard one, and you know, just unreal. You know, when you think about it, going down to featherweight, he had a lot of success at featherweight, very competitive, won a lot of fights, got to the title shot a few times, but never could really get across the line. And then now at bantamweight, you know, he came down, and for me, I feel like it was probably just too late in his career to really leave a mark on it. He's definitely struggled with the speed of guys at featherweight, at bantamweight, sorry. And you know, you can see the writing on the wall with these competitive knockouts, which, well, you know, these back-to-back knockouts almost, you know, happening to Edgar, a guy who was renowned for his chin and his ability to take damage, you know, just having the light shut off so quickly. Kind of reminds me of, not in as bad of a fashion, because for me, I feel like when Chuck Liddell came to the end, it was a bit more ugly in terms of the knockouts in the fights, you know. I feel like Frankie still looks good. It's just when he gets caught, it's over. And for me, he is an inspiration when you think about it, because of the generations of, you know, fighters he's kind of gone through. You look when he came into the UFC, and the sort of skill set of those guys at the time was a bit raw, and he was too good for them. But then the next generation, he was extremely competitive against, you know, the all-round mixed martial artists and some super special strikers. You know, this guy pounded Jair Rodriguez into the canvas when they fought. And, you know, he was even competitive towards the end against this new generation. It's just a shame that, you know, his body is kind of rejected him in a way, and, you know, it's ended like this. But, you know, he picked up a big win against Pedro Munoz, which people forget about. It was a close fight for sure. But yeah, it's sad to see him go out like this. I wish it happened a bit sooner, because, you know, I feel like he's still in phenomenal shape and the skill set is still there to give people problems. It's just he cannot take the punishment which he once could. And, you know, to see him be kind of knocked out in almost like a deja vu sort of way, you know, the way Chris Gutierrez was able to use his angles to kind of draw Edgar in and land the knee, it's kind of a bit sad. But yeah, guys, shout out to Frankie Edgar, man. I hope whatever he does next, he has a lot of success in it. We'll move on to Dan Hooker versus Claudio Puelles. I got this one fucking wrong, didn't I? For me, I thought Puelles would get to the ground at some point. I thought he would be like outmatched on the feet, but he would get the bite to the ground. And when that did happen, I felt like he was going to be too slick for Dan Hooker. And that almost happened, you know. He got to the ground, he was on the leg lock, just couldn't seem to find the right sort of grip and angle. And then, you know, Dan Hooker was able to survive. After that, I thought Dan Hooker did an amazing job at going after him. He was using sort of all three levels. And I felt like early on he was trying to set up a head kick. He was constantly using that right inside leg kick to, in my opinion, you know, get Puelles to start looking down low instead of going up high. In terms of the second round, you know, Dan Hooker had so much success. He was backing Puelles up, and Puelles was almost in a state of, it was almost like he was not scared, but he was panicked, and you could see it, all the sort of work that Dan Hooker was having a lot of effect on him mentally as well as physically. Dan Hooker landed the big teep kick to the body, which it was ended, well, it was the end of the fight in reality. Puelles went down, Dan Hooker got said to get back up, and he landed it again and really hurt him. For me, this is as impressive as a win that Dan Hooker's probably had over the last 3 years, I'd say. I think the last win I can remember was against Nasrat, and that was an impressive one as well. But this one against someone who was so high on my radar, fantastic job. And, you know, he was doing, you know, with the striking, the feints were definitely giving Puelles problems. But what I said, like, the way that he attacked all three levels of the body, whether it be the head, the legs, or the body, you know, phenomenal. I can't kind of see what happens next for him in terms of a matchup. You know, I think it's those guys who can wrestle, have a good chin, have the good fundamentals on the feet, which are always going to give him problems. Going forward, if I was to make the fight, what would happen next? There's one matchup I fucking love, and I don't know if it'll happen or not, but I'd love to see Dan Hooker versus Bobby Green go down in Perth. I think that would be a phenomenal matchup. Kind of play into the wheelhouse of both fighters, you know. Dan Hooker's a guy who's got extremely underrated sort of grappling submissions. The guillotine is always going to be a problem for guys if they do end up shooting. I think Bobby Green, in terms of on the feet, in terms of kickboxing, I'd say Dan Hooker has the advantage, but probably with the hand speed, you're looking at Bobby Green. Bobby Green can wrestle, but, you know, predominantly wants to stay on the feet. I think that'd be a brilliant matchup. Next fight I want to talk about is Renato Moicano versus Brad Riddell. Fucking hell, Moicano wants money. I love you, Joe Hogan. Man, this guy is, with the right backing from the UFC, this guy could be a star, because personality-wise, he's got that sort of funny without trying to be funny vibe, and I really enjoy that about him. You know, he gets on the mic, he calls out everybody. But in terms of this fight, I mean, the jab was one of the reasons why I kind of picked Moicano. Being a bigger guy, having that sort of, you know, that weapon in his arsenal as well makes him extremely dangerous, and we've seen that throughout the years of him fighting. He made a good point about himself, you know, that he went up against Dos Anjos on like 4 days' notice and lost, and everyone's kind of wrote him off. But yeah, this guy's dangerous. I think in terms of his grappling, he's one of the better sort of jiu-jitsu practitioners inside that lightweight division, and can give anyone problems if he ends up in top position or on the back. In terms of the striking, though, this is probably the most underestimated like parts of his game. The jab is just fire, and he busted up Riddell with the jab. Every time Riddell would come into range, he'd be getting popped with the jab. And Riddell is such a good striker as well. He made it kind of look easy. Super impressive from him. And like I said, you know, it was that jab which was really working, but his distance control, he was always just in the right range where he could land the shots, but you know, Riddell would always, you know, fall short. It was an impressive fight, and for me, I think Moicano should get, you know, a top 10 guy next. I think he's done enough in the UFC. He's fought in the you know, UFC now for what seems like an absolute eternity. I feel like he's coming into his sort of own just about now. You look before the Dos Anjos fight, the streak that he went on, it was really phenomenal, and you know, the guy wants money, so I'd like to see him get some big matchups next. Dominic Reyes, Ryan Spann. I ended up picking up Spann. I feel like if Reyes, you know, was at his best, like we saw before the John Jones fight, and well, in the John Jones fight probably, he'd probably beat someone like Ryan Spann, but he's not. There's a lot of talk in this fight about the ability of defense and how he's been working on that at the Glover Teixeira gym. And for me, it's not just the defense which looks like new work. For me, I never felt like he was setting anything up. You know, you see a lot of fighters nowadays. Izzy's probably one of the best sort of guys to reference in terms of how he uses feints to get reads. I didn't feel like Reyes really did that. I felt like he was loading up a lot and kind of ended up with him getting knocked out by the jab. And it's really unfortunate because I think Reyes is a guy who, you know, the UFC is better for having him in the light heavyweight division when he's active, because he's a guy who has phenomenal power. He's a great athlete, and he's always really in entertaining fights. This is a disappointing one for him. I believe this is 4 defeats in a row now. John Jones, Blachowicz, Prohatska, and now Ryan Spann. For Ryan Spann, this is actually a huge win. I mean, you look at the guys who have beat him, and I think those are the only guys that he has lost to now inside his UFC career. You know, if you're Ryan Spann, to be put up there with those names, that's huge. So for him, I think a big fight's coming next. I'm not sure who it will be. I think something like a Nikita Krylov would be a good fight, especially after his win against No Time, Volkan Ozdemir. You know, Nikita Krylov now on a bit of a roll, so I think that would be a good fight. Yeah, I think that's probably the fight to make, to be honest. I think both of them don't have matchups, so that's the one I would go with. Erin Blanchfield absolutely runs through Molly McCann. On the feet, she was able to back McCann up, and kind of McCann was never able to really get in range to really land anything. She got to takedowns, she got to side control with ease. From there, she kind of locked up the crucifix and she was pounding away at Molly McCann. I think the final stats was something like 111 strikes to 6 or something in that region. You know, the fight could have been stopped for the crucifix position. I kind of like the fact that the referee let it go. I do feel like, you know, sometimes in the crucifix, you've got people who are better at, you know, those damaging strikes than others. A lot of the Erin Blanchfield strikes didn't look like the most powerful to me. You know, it was more of a accumulation of strikes, in my opinion. But you know, Erin was super composed when she was on top. You know, she was locking up the Kimura. The first one didn't quite come off, despite being awfully tight. The second one, she was able to get the knee over the head of McCann and finish it with relative ease. This is an awesome performance, and there was kind of question marks around this sort of matchup, right? Because McCann has become such a huge star. You know, why are they feeding her to someone who has such a, you know, big advantage in terms of, you know, the odds, I guess you could say, better rounded MMA fighter. The odds were strongly in Blanchfield's favour. So the question was, why is this fight happening? I was watching one of the morning combat sort of, I guess you could say, daily uploads, one of their podcasts. I don't really know what you call it, but they was talking about this matchup, and they said they think it's kind of similar to the Rosenhammer Eunice versus Paige Van Zandt fight, where they kind of fed a rising star to someone who they believe is a better fighter. And you can kind of see that, you know, because if Erin Blanchfield can take some of that star power that McCann has, you know, she's going to be a problem, because she seems to be an extremely well-rounded MMA fighter with a very good skill set, but really doesn't have that name. Beating someone like McCann has given her, no, I hope it's given her that sort of volume, like people eyes on her. And if it does, you know, she's a star in the making. At only 23, she is a problem for everybody at flyweight. You know, in terms of her next matchup, I'm not too sure. I think Chukagian's coming off a loss. I think that would be a good fight. I think they're probably going to do Manon Fiorot against Valentina Shevchenko. So yeah, I kind of like the Chukagian shout. Andre Petrosky, big win over Wellington Turman. You know, I thought he lost the first round, but after that, you know, he kind of came on right with the wrestling, showed his dominance in grappling. But yeah, guys, I'm probably just going to end it there. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, let me know what you made of the main event. You know, it was one which kind of blew my mind at the time of it happening. I'm going to have to watch it again for sure, because it seemed like Israel was, you know, easing towards the victory and taken away from him in the last round. Let me know your thoughts on the matchup. As always, guys, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll be back again this week. I've got a video which I want to do talking about Undisputed, the boxing game, which is soon to release. Have a great rest of your weekend. Until next time, peace out.